threefold. One is we're going to talk a little bit about the context of the economics we think we're moving into and how that's going to impact us. Jeremy's going to really walk us through an update on loan programs and what we're hearing and learning, and still the things that are not clear. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about resilience, and then we will be done. So please ask your questions. You can do it online. You can do it here in the chat box, and we'll try to answer those as we go or at the end. I think one of the things that's really been worrying us is that we feel like we're in an emergency crisis, and we clearly are, particularly when we think of it in terms of the virus itself and how it continues to grow and expand. And when they talk about leveling off, they're really talking about leveling off the expansion. It got high and it's staying high. And this, everybody knows this is not over. But there's a very well-respected policy group in Washington, D.C. called the Center on Budget and Policy Priorities. And they put out a couple of reports this week that I thought was very interesting for context for us to realize. They're estimating that states and local governments are going to have a huge shortfall in tax revenue, which is not surprising when you stop and think about it, but they're suggesting about $500 billion in 2021. States are required to balance their budgets. There's a prediction that states are going to cut funding on everything like crazy in 2021. And it's going to reflect a heavy recession. So one of the things that Jeremy's going to emphasize, and we emphasize in our masterclass, which is not only about survival, but it's about sustainable. We're going to have 18 months, 2 years, maybe more, of very heavy unemployment, people not going out much. People are not going to go out, no matter if they open up, as they say. Are you going to run into a crowd? Are you going to go sit in a crowded bar? Economic folks say absolutely not. This is going to be a very slow process, and we want to be very realistic, as we've always tried to be, about the problems with the economy and how it's going to affect all of us, because it's not just our donors, but it's going to be such heavy unemployment and state budgets being so crammed. But they put this report out on Tuesday and really predict deep budget cuts. On Monday, they put out another report that I also thought was very interesting, is that they say with the unemployment, it's going to be so slow in getting back that they're really thinking from a public policy point of view, we need to convince the government to continue the federal relief measures until the labor market is substantially recovered, not to an arbitrary date. And this is another kind of red flag for us about how this is going to impact our families that we serve and the people that we work with. And so it's rather sobering. And I think a lot of us have had this in our mind, but it's getting very clear this thing is not going to just be over at some point. It's going to take a while to wind back up. So with that warm and exciting introduction, I want to invite Jeremy Hobbs to give us an update briefing on all the loan programs. Jeremy?
Hi, Stephen. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. It's good to see all of you this morning, and that was a very cheerful opening that Stephen gave us. But sometimes it's better to understand where we are, and we can make better decisions than to hope for different things. And that's kind of the focus of what I wanted to talk with you all about a little bit this morning, because I've been thinking a lot about this, and with the nonprofits I work with, as well as some of the businesses I work with, this is one of the things we're coming to terms with, getting to grips with what, now that we're a month into this, what looked like a major crisis, what do we do over the longer haul? Because there's going to be a longer haul. So there are three things I wanted to talk about today. The first is I wanted to give everybody kind of an update of what I know about the PPP loans and the EIDL loans, where we are, and what things look like on the landscape of that. What we've seen is that there have been a lot of submissions some money is starting to trickle out. From everything I hear, the money is going out to the largest borrowers first. That makes some sense because the banks get paid based on a percentage. So they're going to take the biggest ones first. I've also seen that the community banks, the smaller banks, have been getting funds out more quickly than the largest banks. But things are really starting to open up here, even in the last 24 to 48 hours, on actually seeing some funding moving out to people. We still have a large number of nonprofits that I have been speaking with that have not been able to apply for the PPP loans because they haven't been able to find a lender. Either their local bank is not participating, or their regular lender has simply said that they're not accepting any more applications. And I hope you'll share this information. There are some new lenders in the field, particularly in the financial tech industries. Kabbage, which is with a K, K-A-B-B-A-G-E, is accepting some loans online. Square, PayPal, and Intuit are all putting up, if they haven't already gotten up, online lending participation. So I can't tell you that they're going to accept applications from entities that they're not familiar with, but I know that they're opening it up, and that is supposed to be their goal. So we're going to see a little more of that. On the other hand, about 250 billion of the 350 billion is already spoken for. So that initial window for time to apply is closing pretty rapidly. So please, if you're on the fence about applying for a PPP, it's worth spending a good part of your day to find a lender you can use and getting those loans in the queue. There is discussion in Congress about extending this to another $250 billion, but that has not happened. There'll be a lot of back and forth, as you can imagine, on that. I also very much encourage you to go online, and for those of you who either have 1099 employees or are 1099 yourselves. Just last night, the SBA put out a new guidance on how to, what counts and how to apply for the small business or the independent contractor, sole proprietor protections, and that's out there right now. And afterward I'll ask Mihai to put a link to the information on the site. But that just came out last night. It gives you an overview on how to do that application. You may well have people who you consider employees who are independent contractors, or people you're working with who have not been able to make those applications yet. Those are starting to roll in too. And again, time is of the essence. We want to speed along. I'd also encourage any organization to be looking at the EIDL loans. Those are directly through the SBA. There's an initial it's up to a $10,000 immediate assistance. There are two things that are happening. One, they're not giving the full $10,000, and two, it's not immediate. But nonetheless, there's some immediacy to that. And then there's also, that's a loan that goes up to quite a large amount of money. That's a standard process through the SBA. You don't go to a bank for that. You go to the SBA site. The SBA then partners with the bank. But it's worth doing those. And the question of, can you do both? You can apply for both. Yes, you can. And what the process is supposed to be is that the payroll-related amounts in your EIDL loan will be carved off and turned into a PPP loan. I also, I wish I could give you clear-cut message on this one, but be careful about applying at a bunch of different locations for loans. Some people have advised that that's the right way to go. You know, if you've tried your main bank and nothing is happening, go try another one. The danger with that is that they've created a pretty tight fraud alert on these loans, and that's triggered by the EIN number. And I do know one entity which applied for 2 loans, and both loans were denied on the basis that they had other loans. So it's a complicated process, so just be careful about it. My best recommendation is that if you have a banker, if you're working with a banker, stay in constant touch with them. But do look at these new financial tech loan applications. Kabbage, Square, PayPal, and Intuit are all launching or have launched. Kabbage has been up for about a week. The other ones, I think, when I looked last night, they were in the process of going up. I want to jump now to put the loans aside for a minute, and it really goes to what Stephen was talking about, and that is, as individuals, as nonprofits, and as the nonprofit community, I think that we are all best served if we make some assumptions. And the first assumption is maybe that nobody else is going to help us outside of our own community. And so what I would really urge you to do is, as you continue to make the application for these various loans, but do some planning on the basis that you may not get them. That the government is not going to step in. We know that the government is not stepping in as rapidly as we anticipated. We also know that this money may well run out, and politics will keep us from getting more. So what do we do if we are not going to get any more, if we are not going to get PPP loans or EIDL loans? And I really wanted to talk to you a little bit about that. And some is a general thing, and then some specifics. One, in a time like we're living in right now, one of the most valuable things we can do is be adaptable. And that is, we've got to make plans, but we've got to realize that our great plans yesterday, today don't mean anything because something changed in the world. So it can be very frustrating. We think we're moving forward and then we take a couple steps back. But in this kind of situation, that's exactly what we need to do. As someone very, very intelligent told me once, when you got to zig, zig. When you got to zag, zag. And we all need to be ready to do that. It can be frustrating. We think we're moving forward, but we have to be ready to change. The other thing is, and I know many of you are staying on or tuning into webinars and getting as much information as you can. I can't encourage that enough. It can't be your whole day because then nothing gets done. But to really spend a half hour or an hour a day really looking at reliable sources, whether it's searching online, whether it's in a Zoom meeting of reliable sources where you think the information is good, whether it's talking to your banker, talking to your board members. Take some time every day to absorb information. What's going on in the world, how things might have changed. The speed at which things change and the speed at which people come up with new solutions is quite amazing right now. The other thing I would highly recommend is, we all need to do this, and I do it, and we all need to do it, is as we're looking ahead, we don't know what the path is going to be. We have our favorite path. We have a more realistic path. We need to have several paths. We need to be able to think about what are the options that are out there, and how can I act in a way that's going to leave as many of those options open today. I know that's sometimes a hard thing to say, but you want to leave your options open so you can move if situations change, and that's part of this whole adaptability. The quickness of movement is just critical right now. And sometimes in not-for-profits, that's not what we think about. We're a little more steady, we're a little more staid, but in this situation, the ability to pivot and move in a different direction is really going to be critical for our survival and for our sustainability, and to allow us to continue to deliver those services that are important. And that goes to another point, which is a very, very hard point, but it reiterates, I think, what I've spoken to a few times, and a lot of people don't like it, but I think I just have to share it. The number one, if you have a not-for-profit that has a real purpose, if you're doing services, you're providing services to people, you're doing something that's important, the number one thing you can do is survive. It doesn't do anybody any good if all we're doing is dragging out an inevitable collapse by taking actions that are not strengthening our organization. It's very hard words to hear, to say and to hear. I know that. What does that mean? That means if we can't sustain our payroll in a foreseeable way, we have to cut it. We can't hope that things will get better in a week or we'll finally get some funding in a month, because in a month we'll have drained down the resources and the reserves of our organization, and we threaten its very existence. So it's never pleasant to do, but as we look at these options and we think about how we're going to survive, taking definitive action today is really important. Think through, take definitive action, try to leave the opportunities that are there open. When you reduce your payroll, when you reduce the expenses, you're opening more options for the future. And I think we do have to look forward. Things will change eventually. We'll make them change. But to put ourselves in a position to make that change is what's so vitally important. And so again, I reiterate the same things. Really take the time to look through your expenses right now. Pare them out, whatever you can pare out. Even the employee who is so valuable to you, there are acceptable unemployment provisions right now. We don't like laying off employees, we just hate it. But it's part of what we need to do if we aren't providing the services with those employees and we're draining out our organizations. Cut down on all the extraneous things you can possibly cut down on. If you can cut out some subscriptions, if you can make sure, I always say these because people forget about them, look at what your auto pays are, automatic payments are, so you can cut them down. You don't need to be doing that. Right now, you need to be surviving. And we don't want to just be sitting out there looking and waiting for someone else to bail us out. We'll take action. You know, those of us who lived through the AIDS crisis back in the 80s and the 90s, remember that we were all kind of stunned when the whole thing was happening and the world seemed to be falling apart. And we very quickly realized that no one was there to jump to our assistance. And the communities themselves started to solve the problems and take care of ourselves. And then we expanded to other communities that were affiliated. And that was really a grassroots organization. And it did change, I believe, the way people were looking at nonprofits and the way we attracted a mission. And I just think we're in a similar kind of situation. In the back of our minds, we can hope for some sort of bailout from the government, but I don't think we can expect one. And I think we're much better off if we actually anticipate that we are going to have to take care of ourselves and our communities. So on the expense side, I just can't reiterate enough, controlling those costs, reducing them. If you've got to lay people off, lay people off. If you've got to take a building that you're in and lock it up and turn off all the electricity to it, and sometimes you just have to do that. We've got to be prepared to move forward. Other little things, like if you're all of a sudden not providing the services you were providing a month ago, call your insurance agent and say, hey, I've changed everything. My business model is very different. Can I reduce my insurance premiums? I still want the coverage to protect things, but all of a sudden I'm not doing what I did. Just get that refund, get that reduction. I also, for anyone who does have insurance, I'd also encourage you to, if your policy has any provision for something like business interruption, I know that sounds odd in a non-for-profit, but occasionally it does trickle in, apply for that. Even if your agent says no, it's going to be denied, you want to go ahead and apply for it. What's happened is a couple states back east, the state government has actually forced insurers to cover business interruption insurance claims, even though it's expressly denied in the policy, has forced them to cover claims related to this. So we're looking at every place we can try to get something. And then I'd like to really take a minute and ask you to think about how we should be looking at the revenue side of the business. How are we going to get money in? Where probably most of us on this call have either applied or have considered applying for the emergency loans, either the EIDL or the PPP loans. Remember that if we get a PPP loan, 75% of it has to be spent on payroll. You got 25% to spend on rent, mortgages, or utilities. But if that's the requirement of that loan, and to have it forgiven, you're going to have to spend that money in 8 weeks. So when that money comes in, you really want to think about how you're spending it. And Stephen makes the point, maybe we need to extend these things out longer because this crisis, and life is not going to be back to normal 8 weeks after you receive this payment under PPP. But you've got to be careful about what that means. It means you're going to be rehiring all your employees. What are they going to be doing? So there are a lot of issues, and I think we'll have another webinar on that as we dig deeper in it. But those are one resources. Now, there are two others I'd like to focus on for just a minute. One is really start to look out there as well at what some of the grants that are available from foundations. The Funders Alliance is a good resource. The Inland Empire Community Foundation is a good resource. Many of the larger foundations have been pooling their, there's a lot of money that's been going out from a lot of the larger foundations. Many of them have been pooling the money and creating a fund which is being administered by something. For instance, the Inland Empire Community Foundation has a fund. Other funders do as well. Start getting out there and ask, and go ahead and make those applications, because you want that. Any money that's available out there, you want to go for it and try to grab it in this time. And then I want to talk about what I think is the most important thing on the revenue side is either continuing or rebuilding your relationship with donors. I don't know if we've all had the time to reach out to our significant donors and even our smaller donors since this crisis has happened. And it's been quite wonderful that a lot of organizations have sent out messages of hope and thanks and gratitude, which is really wonderful. It's a great thing when you open one of those and I feel wonderful when I receive something that says, just thinking of you, hope you're doing well. And I think that's a really strong thing, and we always want to be doing that. I think also that at this point, our potential funders, our best funders are the people who have worked with us for a period of time and know our organizations and believe in what we do and believe in the people we work with. Having a communication with those donors is very important, and I'd just like to give you a couple of suggestions that have worked in the world that I've been working in. One is, it's very valuable for a donor to know that you have a plan, and not a plan for the next day, but a plan for 6 months from now, that you've thought ahead enough to what Stephen is saying is the world has changed, and this is my plan to get from here to, let's just say, November. 6 months out. I'm just throwing that number out. But I think it's helpful if you are able to say, we've reduced our payroll, we have reduced our office costs, we've shuttered one of our facilities, we are still providing services, we have this much, this is our expense rate per month, this is how much money we have, and this is what I'm asking of you. I'm asking you to make a commitment of X dollars. And if you make that commitment of X dollars and I get 3 more donors who make that commitment, I am confident that with my plan, I will be able to continue to develop, to provide services over the next 6 months. And then at that point, we can most likely go back to what we've been doing. But I think that kind of information for a donor, and I don't mean down into the very details, but to have it in your own mind, your detailed plan is very important for a donor. Donors want to support you. I'm privileged enough to be able to support a few organizations, and the ones who have been the ones that I am most confident and happiest have come to me with exactly that kind of conversation. This is why we need it. This is what we're doing in the face of this problem. Here are the different things we're trying. We can't guarantee that they're all going to work, but this is what we're doing. And will you support us? Can you help us get to where we want to go? Also, will you turn to people who you believe could support our mission? I think it's time to do that. I would not just tell you that what's not been effective for me and the people I'm talking to who are donors is just the general, hey, can you give me $10,000? Those are falling on deaf ears because there are hundreds of them piling into people's mailboxes. Give us a plan and have a conversation. Reach out and say, hey, we can't meet for coffee, but we can meet for coffee online, or we can have this conversation. I can provide you with some information and planning. I think that's a really important part from my sense of the donor. The other is be ready. The last thing is there anything in your organization? Is there anything that you have that is an asset and think about what your assets are that right now can be turned either to generating some funds or to just making the world a better place. Here's an example. One organization I'm working with has a great volunteer group. This organization is completely shut down. It simply cannot provide. It's a theater company. It cannot provide anything. There's nothing. There's no theater that's happening. Well, their volunteers are really excited, energized volunteers. They're putting together a program to make masks. Okay, they're putting a program together to sew masks. They're going to give some of the masks away, but the other thing they're going to do is sell some of the masks as a fundraiser, right? And so they've got this group of volunteers, most of whom are sitting at home, not doing much, who are willing to sew and do something. So when you think about what your assets are, your volunteers are an asset to an organization. How can you use them? If you're not providing the services that you typically have provided, is there a way to use the volunteers in a way that, one, helps your organization, and two, is doing something good for the society that we're in right now and trying to solve some of the troubles that we're in? That's kind of an overview of what I'm saying. You've got to be, I think my recommendation is, and what I'm doing and what the organizations I'm working with, is planning that we're not going to get any help from the government, and that these loans may be a little shot in the arm, but we're going to end up, it's not going to do much for us. It's not going to build up our organizations. At best, what they'll do is provide a little bit of money for our employees for a period of a couple months. So we have to not count on that. And so we're looking at, okay, that may come in, but what are we doing? And how are we going to build our organization to make it through the next month, 2 months, 6 months? And then how do we think about coming back? So that's kind of my overview. If there are any questions, put them out there in the chats or the questions, and I'm happy to do it. Otherwise, I'm going to turn it over to and Susie put up a chat on the thing to everybody that Lindio, and that is true. I didn't mention them. Lindio is doing, as far as I can see, a great job at accepting applications and is definitely worth approaching.
Thank you, Jeremy. That was quite thorough. And once again, very optimistic. So moving right along, let me tell you, we were just, some of us on here were just on another webinar, and it looks like that the Inland Empire Community Foundation is going to open up one of their funds next week for applications. They have a group of 4 or 5 things they're focusing on, like technology. And so Inland Empire Community Foundation starting next week. Also, the Funders Alliance are doing 2 waves of funding, and the first one was for networks and associations of organizations, and they've given that money out, and they're getting ready to launch their second wave. So the Funders Alliance will be a source for grants, and also a good broker to find out who is giving grants, because there's a lot of funds being created, is your local United Ways. So they should have one of the better lists, and I think that the Community Foundation will also soon have a list up of potential funders. So those are emergency funds. They're not very good for ongoing, but they can help you out if you're still trying to sort how to get some resources together quickly. I also wanted to say that, you know, when we think about where our money comes from, it's really through, so much of it comes from government policy and funding. And right now, I think it's very important for all of us to be supporting the advocacy groups that are doing policy advocacy. And whether you're doing it yourself or others you know are doing it, we need to get people, you know, mailing in, emailing in, calling their legislators. And there's 3 or 4 things that have been identified as hugely important on a very large scale, and that's the increase of SNAP benefits, on getting the $1,200 cash distribution to poor seniors, veterans, people with disabilities who are not doing tax returns. They don't do tax returns. Some of these people, they need the money more than anybody, and getting the implementation of that program on that, it would be hugely important. Also, some states have started applying for flexibility with the federal regulations to give additional nutrition benefits to children who used to get food at school. There's 2 states that have been approved as of yesterday, and getting the rest of the states doing it would be very helpful. Michigan and Rhode Island were the only states. So California, for example, has not gotten this yet, but it would be a huge benefit. So I want to talk a little bit about resilience and your time of resilience. I have a friend who runs urgent care clinics all over the East Coast. And to say that their business is overwhelmed is unbelievable. A number of them are doing testing. And he's been very, very concerned about the burnout of his local clinic directors. And he sent around a note that a group of therapists had put together about boosting our resilience in the time of crisis. And I thought it was really good. We're not too touchy-feely here. We're kind of like, add up your numbers and cut your costs. But I want to just run through these real quick to remind you, because some of them I thought were very important. One of the first one is to manage your expectations about yourself. Your kids are at home. You're cooking all the time. You've got to be careful everywhere you go. You've got stress like crazy. And then you have this issue about trying to help an organization survive and provide service to others. And you want to be super productive, and you want to be really focused, and you want to take care of stuff, because that's the way we are. And we need to manage those expectations of ourselves and lighten up on ourselves a little bit. And we need to be conscious about exercises that we can do to reduce our stress, whether it's taking long walks or sitting in a dark room by ourselves for a few minutes, whatever it takes to consciously reduce your stress level. You need to find things that you can be optimistic about, but realistic, because sometimes, you know, you turn on the TV and if you flip through the channels, it can get pretty unoptimistic. Also, they say it's extraordinarily important for you to establish a routine of when you eat your meals, getting your sleep, having time off. And I think particularly in the middle of your workday, to take a 10-minute break can be really important, but you need a regular routine because it sets the clock in your body. You need to be compassionate with yourselves and with others, and be patient. Everybody's under stress, and you know, you see the uptick in domestic violence. They say in China the divorce rates doubled in the last 2 or 3 months. Which is crazy, but kind of understanding. And then it says make an effort to keep your connections and your relationships alive, whether it's, you know, meeting for coffee on Zoom or calling folks and actually talking to them on the telephone. But make it a very conscious effort to stay in contact, and don't find yourself in 5 days from now feeling extraordinarily isolated and alone. I thought these were good steps and worth mentioning to us, because your resilience is going to be key to you getting through this successfully as anything else you could do. So let me encourage you all. You're very strong. You're very resilient. I was talking to a group of affiliates from United Cerebral Palsy, which I used to run years ago. And you know, we were saying about most of the programs and organizations we created were not viable. They never have been viable. And yet we found a way to survive for 30, 40, 50 years. And so it's not easy, but if there's anybody that is more capable and resilient, it's leaders in social impact and not-for-profits, to be scrappy, to be successful in a non-viable moment. So I wish you the best of luck and we are going to finish in 35 minutes. So let's take a quick look and see if there's any questions, and then we will move on. Let's see. Lindio, yep. Great. Okay, take care of yourselves. We'll talk soon. We'll let you know. We're going to do some updates on PPP and the other loan program. Talk some more about things that you can be doing, and particularly if you get a loan, how you can spend it well, and just generally try to keep you updated on what's going on. So thanks a lot for coming, and we'll see you soon.
Thanks for
Bye-bye.
being here, everybody.